Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. And good morning, Shannon. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Besides the fact that my dogs have been going nuts and being pain, that's not what you want to wake up to.
No.
One having an accident in the living room and in the bedroom, and
They
starts your
always say
Friday.
have a dog, right? And get a pet. And so I have cats. Mine are notoriously puking first thing in the morning. So I don't know what that's about either. I ask them questions like, "Why are you doing this?" And of course, they're cats; they don't respond. But yeah, that's it's not a fun reality to wake up to.
Yeah. So, for everyone watching, this is my new coworker. This is our new teammate, Shannon. How do you pronounce your last name? Because I'm French and I never.
Sure. Well, and I would have never taken offense if you would have mispronounced it because it's very common with my last name. So it's pronounced Keen, like peachy keen.
Okay.
So the story is, I suspect that when my family, immigrated over from Germany, they didn't really understand English phonetics. They understood German phonetics, right?
Yep.
And so they wanted to make it seem more American when they were, kind of settling in Central America. And they just kind of said, "Oh, K," and then it ends in an N. Let's call it Keen. And believe me, my whole family, we always are just like, "Yeah, it's Keen. Sorry, it doesn't look like it at all."
Because I was thinking like coon, keen, like because there's a U in there, and I'm
Right?
French, so I put the emphasis on the wrong syllable all the time.
Yeah. So you would not be alone. I think it's more often mispronounced than pronounced correctly. So do not feel. Uh,
Uh,
I guess. Yeah. Don't worry about it because it's very much so a name that's always mispronounced.
so you are new to the IT Ops Talk team.
I am.
You came from the Azure VMware solution team.
Yeah, so we called ourselves the Enterprise Platforms and Tools team. And then we started out with the Azure VMware Solutions stack just because of the fact that the idea VMware is working with Microsoft very closely with the solution was a super interesting proposition. And we wanted to get out there and build content, lead community events, deliver talks, and just be involved in the community because I think there are a number of enterprises out there that have not yet really embraced cloud, and it's an
Mhm.
opportunity for them to say, "Hey, we can get on this boat to cloud or plane to cloud finally," because it's the same platform that you have on premises. It's just now living in Azure.
Yeah, and we were last time we were talking. It's a natural fit for you to come into our team because our your audience is our audience
Oh, very much
in
so.
like 95% of them.
Very much so. Yeah, and I think, you've got those enterprises that have been a little slow to move everything, and now they can think about moving everything and then sort of pick apart what they need to once everything's out of their on-premises data center and into Azure. And when you're closer to the ARM APIs, it makes, I guess, integrations a little easier. So you can integrate with things that are hard to do when your workloads live on premises.
Yeah, and you say if you're not ready to go, um, I personally don't believe that anybody at any point is going to be 100% cloud. Where there's
Right.
always going to be some portion of the workloads that are beyond prem. So hybrid with that solution is a wonderful way because you could have basically you manage your machine the same way on prem as you
Right.
would in the cloud.
Right, exactly. So you can think about automation using vRealize. You can think about automation using the Power CLI commandlet library. You can templatize your VM deployments. I mean, you get the same look and feel. It's just you can think about moving some of your workloads from on premises into Azure, especially if you don't want to spend the money to re up or buy brand new servers. Those get to be pretty expensive.
Yep. Just before we get started, I'm just taking a quick look at the chat room. We have Andrew McCallum with us again. Good morning, Andrew, or good afternoon for you. You're in the UK, I believe. We have Rabbit Jr., and I believe Rabbit is from Africa or South Africa. Think the last time we talked about that. And so if you have any questions or anything like that, make sure you put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to it through the show. And that being said, let's go into our first news item. So our first news item today is at-scale management of Azure Monitor alerts in Backup Center. It doesn't look like much, but when you have your, if you're familiar with Azure Monitor and Azure Backup Center, if you've got all your environments, and in traditional on-prem environment, you would have a limited number of backup, like you'd have your Commvault, or you would have your whatever backup provider you're using, you'd have one to manage like a lot of servers.
Right.
In the cloud, you could have one backup center or one backup vault for every resource group or every subscription or every workload that you're pushing out there, so that they can be managed separately. But now, how do you start managing? Okay, the backup backup failed, the test restored failed, or there's an error on it. There's a warning. When you have all of these different backup vault or recovery vaults scattered across one or multiple subscription.
Yeah.
Azure Monitor is built to manage that, or to help you manage and keep an eye on your workloads wherever they may be in your hybrid environment. So with Azure Backup Center starting to leverage the alerting features of Azure Monitor, now regardless of where your backup center may be or your backup vault will be, you're leveraging the alerting capabilities of Azure Monitor so that you can keep an eye on it at scale, regardless where you may be in all of your environment, whether it's on-prem for hybrid or in the cloud or multiple clouds. So that's really, really cool. And the fact that you can do this all from within Azure Backup Center. So you don't have to leave and go to Azure Monitor, set up your alerts, then come back into Azure Backup Center to see what's happening. Everything is there. Everything is actionable. So if you click on the alert in Azure Backup Center, it'll take you right to the VM where the problem was, or the storage account, wherever it may be. So it opens up a lot of possibilities in terms of streamlining your management of that.
And I do like the fact that it's all the single pane of glass. I think we've really listened to our customers. They don't want to go to 5 different things to figure out what failed. They'd like to have a centralized something that allows you to go in granularly. So I like seeing that. That's an awesome win, I think, for our customers.
I think it's kind of like a common theme these days, because we've realized that a few years back where the engineers kind of worked on it. And now it's starting, like every other product is saying, okay, now it's in preview where we've got integration where this part of this service is now available inside this part of this service, and vice versa. I find it really, really cool. And it kind of makes you think, why didn't we do this in the first place?
Right. I mean, we're kind of agile in real life, right? Like that's kind of what Azure is all in. I don't know. I often feel like we do some things and we need that feedback, right? Because what I think I need may not be what every customer needs or what every customer could potentially need. So I feel like we kind of throw things against a wall. We figure out if the pasta will stick. And if it doesn't stick, we ask why, and then we add some of the feedback in. And I don't know. It's weird because it's not what we were used to prior to cloud, right? We were used to kind of boxed products that kind of hung out in the world of the 3 to 4 year mark, and things didn't really evolve or change too much. Now they're changing. I don't know. Sometimes it feels like daily.
Yeah. I'm laughing because I was building a demo for an EBC not too long ago, and I'm running through my demo and like, okay, I got all my steps and everything. And the day before I start going through my demo, and the UI's changed. They changed something in the portal. So like, I go back and I change it. And then the morning of, I was like, okay, I'm going to run through it one more time before we got my EBC in the afternoon. And for people who don't understand Microsoft acronyms, because we have a few.
Too many.
The alphabet soup that we call the Microsoft. Anyway, EBC is an executive briefing center setting. So it companies that comes in to see how we can help them. And I run an hour before the session, and they changed it again.
It's hard when you support customers because they expect you to be the subject matter expert, and you're walking them through something and you're like, this completely changed. It was different yesterday, So so yeah, that's the world we live in. It's very iterative. It changes, yeah, it feels like daily sometimes, right? Keeps us on our toes.
Which is why I love infrastructure as code.
Oh yeah, big time.
Because that way your code's the same, the REST APIs are the same, the ARM templates are pretty much the same. You're not victim to the changes in UI because somebody tweaked something somewhere in the portal. So command line for life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think that's when I realized like I should get better at command line, because I don't know if I think we had very similar backgrounds, very infrastructure focused. We're used to wizards and GUIs, and this just changed everything in terms of our skill set. So yeah, hitting the REST API is easier, right?
It's easier, but there's a drawback to using the REST API versus the ARM resource manager. When you do
yeah,
it,
right.
When you're doing the REST API, you're bypassing all of the validation.
Right.
If you're doing an ARM template, if you're submitting an ARM template, it validates that it's actually going to work before it tries to deploy it. If you're doing a REST API, it assumes you know what you're talking about and just does it.
Right.
So you could have some issues with that.
Right. It's just it's a different world, right? Different world we live in.
Well, there's so many ways I was going to say something, but it's not politically correct. There's many ways of making this happen.
Yeah.
I'm lost for words because the expression that normally comes to head that I don't want to say live on. Oh, I'm an idiot. All right. Our second item is for you. So we're talking about Azure Reservations.
Yeah, so we just announced a public preview. So you can place Azure Reservations at the management group level and then the billing level, right? So if you've got a number of different resources in your subscriptions, as long as they're part of this management group, you can buy a reservation for Azure SQL, and it'll just hit every single Azure SQL instance within those groups of within that management group, right? You can do that with Azure VMware Solution. Believe it or not, there's a reservation you can buy. You can do that with storage, with VMs. It's a pretty easier, well, how about this? It's an easier reality than it used to be, because I can tell you when this first came around, I was supporting customers pretty regularly, and we'd have to get out Excel spreadsheets to figure out how many VMs they had, how many they should be potentially accounting for. Now it's sort of that one fell swoop. Once you've got everything grouped up in a management group, you can apply that reservation towards the entirety of your subscription layout. So I feel like that should be an awesome win for the customers that are tired of keeping track of things in Excel spreadsheets. And it sort of helps out, right? It makes things a little easier.
So before this changed, a reservation would be applicable to the subscription where it was actually made.
Correct.
So if you have an organization and you're splitting across multiple subscriptions for multiple business units, for example, you'd have to keep track of how many reservations you've had for all of your subscriptions.
Yeah, and I think some of the tooling to keep track of it has evolved, but when it first came about, it was a little bit more manual, right? And
Right.
I think we had listened to customers when they had expressed frustration with trying to keep up with their reservations. And so this is an awesome opportunity, a unique opportunity for customers to lean on management groups versus having to think about it subscription by subscription. If you have a VM that lives in these groups of subscriptions and it's in a specific VM family, awesome. It'll be applied to all of those VMs in that family, right? If you've got a bunch of storage accounts in a group of subscriptions, you buy some reservation with the storage accounts, and you're able to apply that to all storage accounts and it's net new too, right? So if you spin up a brand new storage account, that'll automatically get applied to anything that gets spun up after the reservation has been sort of applied to the management group. So it seems like an awesome win on that front.
And the billing also has changed. So you can actually assign the billing as to the context of where the billing actually occurs is not tied to where you're applying the reservations.
Correct. And that's an awesome switch too. So it feels like it's sort of the easy button. Maybe this is probably where we should have landed. But again, we're iterative. We're trying to figure out the right way to have this match up with what an enterprise would be looking for. So I think this is an awesome public preview to see launch.
Yeah, I'm actually keeping an eye on the chat room here. We've got a couple people. Sujit, Chidit is a new viewer that I've never really noticed the name before. So they're having a conversation on the new Microsoft exams that were announced, on new certifications. So welcome aboard. All right, so let's keep going with the news. The next one is really close to my heart because I am. A couple years ago, I gave my wife and my daughters that were going to university some Surface Pros.
Oh.
Yep, and now we have the new 8 new models of Surface devices, just in time for me to be able to replace those Surface Pro 3s that are still very functional and working really, really well still. So
yeah, they're rock solid. These are going to be awesome to see, though, kind of evolve.
Yeah, I'm thinking a studio for me, some goes for the girls for school, and maybe a Surface Pro 3, Surface Pro 8 for my wife as a teacher. She loves it too. She goes to school with it. She takes the keyboard out, and she bought a case that has like a strap behind, so she can put her hand in it and keep it. And she just, as she goes in class, she has her tablet with her, and she uses her finger. She loves it.
Very cool. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot more flexibility that the Surface Pro lineup allows for. When I was a consultant, we all were given Surface Pros, and super awesome to travel with, very lightweight, but they also pack a punch. If you can actually hook up 2 additional monitors, there's a lot going on in that Surface Pro, right? So they're pretty meaty machines if you want them to be.
Yeah, and they have some of them have the lightning port on them.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about additional monitors with the lightning port, you're gonna get some really good resolution, some really good performance out of those, like right out of the box.
Right.
I have got 3 of them on my desk here. I've got the Surface Book 2, Surface Laptop 3, and my old Surface Pro 3. That is just kind of like it's almost like an extra monitor. It sits on my desk and kind of has a Microsoft Learn TV on it all day, so I can keep track of what's going on and who's speaking. So it's kind of cool.
Nice.
So we're kind of looking forward to these are going to be hitting. They've been announced. I'm not sure. I think they're already on the store. I'm not sure if they're actually shipping just yet, but if you're interested, go to Microsoft.com and check out the store. And our last, where's my, oh, there it is. My mouse kind of got lost in the multiple monitors that I had here. Our last item for today is about some disaster recovery.
Yes. So last week, we announced the JetStream components for Azure VMware Solutions. So it's in public preview. You can enable the JetStream, I guess, service or functionality within your environment. And so what it does is it leans on vSphere replication, and it will handle replicating VMs either from on-premises into Azure VMware Solution or Azure VMware Solution in one region to another. And it's agentless. So that's why a lot of customers like this. And there were enough customers where it made sense to sort of build this integration. And what we're seeing is a lot of great third-party integrations coming into the mix, right? So we see that most closely with all the backup scenarios. This is the first DR solution that is truly a third-party solution. We also have Site Recovery Manager too. That's VMware's flavor of disaster recovery, leaning on vSphere replication. That reached GA a little earlier in the year, but we're trying to meet customers where they are. So if you are a JetStream customer, you now have an offering where you can plug that into an Azure VMware Solution environment and lean on the same tooling that you're used to leaning on when it comes to your on-premises environment.
Well, I feel that it's a natural progression, considering the companies that we're trying to support with giving or providing the solution on Azure, they may be using their third party or their partner solutions to
Right.
help them out with backup and DR, as you mentioned. So it's just a natural progression to say, okay, well, all of you are using this, so we're going to enable it in Azure so that you can keep doing the work the way you've been doing it.
Right, right. And that way it frees up. So prior to all of these services, you had to sort of embrace IaaS at first or PaaS. And that's a hard proposition if you're used to your VMware ecosystem on premises.
Yep.
So it sort of prolongs the inevitable, but it also allows you to take on skilling at a time that makes sense for your company. And I think that's the biggest differentiator if you want to think about it that way, right? You don't have to learn about an Azure IaaS VM first thing. You can just have your VMs live in vSphere on premises, replicate it into Azure VMware solution, have your whole ecosystem with backup and DR taken care of, and then you can start to pick apart and learn the technologies to help you continue forward with your digital transformation. So it gets interesting.
Yeah, and once you're in a position where you've got your VMware on-prem and you've got your VMware in an Azure solution for your DR backup, whatever, or just because of the expansion of your footprint, and then you start deploying other workloads that are native to Azure in terms of IaaS or PaaS, they tie in really well with what you've already got in VMware.
Yes, yes, correct. Yeah, so it's kind of like achievement unlocked, right? You beat a hard boss. You've got everything into Azure faster, and now you're closer to the ARM APIs, so you can do things like you can extend what you're doing. You can integrate with different third party, well, not third party, different Azure native services.
Yeah.
So you can start to think about expanding what you know and sort of embracing different Azure services and learning about it versus drinking from the fire hose first thing, right? That's not a fun proposition. I think a lot of customers were like, I have to learn all this new stuff, and no, now you don't, but you probably still want to learn about the new stuff, but you don't have to learn it as fast as you did if you didn't have a VMware environment to move everything to.
Yeah, and Andrew has a good comment in the chat saying that the DR and business continuity planning is often overlooked and out of date in a lot of organizations.
Oh yeah, and you think about it when you're in a bad spot, and you're like, oh, it would have made sense to plan for this before this disaster happened, right? That's always the way it works.
Before I came back to advocacy, I was customer facing with Microsoft, and we did a review of an organization, and I'm not going to name them because I don't want to shame them publicly. And they failed the audit, and it was not like a licensing audit. It was really a supportability audit, and they failed the audit for one reason: is they had no business continuity plan or disaster recovery plan.
Yeah.
So when I got called into the director's office to discuss my findings. So that was ominous to start with. So I go in there, and he's like, "Oh, what are you talking about? We failed this, and I have to put that up to my boss, and he's not going to be happy that we failed the supportability audit." And blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Well, you identified all of the leads of all of your circle of excellence in your environment, so like all the identity, the security, the networking." And none of them had any idea about, through the interviews in the review process, none of them had any idea about your disaster recovery. He goes, "We have a plan." And I said, "Really?" And he literally, and I kid you not, turned around, grabbed a binder out of his bookshelf, blew the dust off the top, and said, "Here it is. We spent a lot of money for a consultant to set that up for us, but nobody had ever read it."
Oh yeah. And I've worked for those companies, and you're like, wow, so you spent all this money for somebody to write this document that nobody's implementing. Yeah, that's a hard one. That's a hard one.
And if the guys that are supposed to be taking care of a disaster don't know about the plan and have never practiced it, it's not a plan.
Right.
It's a pipe dream.
It's an idea. It's just an idea at this point, right?
Yep.
It's an idea that only like one or two people know about, right? So
that's right. So let's move on with the rest of our show, because we've got 5 minutes left to go. You have some events coming up next week.
Ooh, I do. So first things first, I wanted to give a shout out to Shabazz Dar, and I think I'm saying his last name correctly as well. We are building out an AVS Zero to Hero series. He did something very similar for ABD. I always want to say WVD. And so look for that. We are in the process of filming that. So I suspect it will launch probably maybe middle of October, and the episodes will launch weekly. So we'll start to give some amplification as we get a little closer to that point. I will be doing a live stream with VMware next Tuesday. And I think I've given you the YouTube link.
Yep, I'm
What
putting it
you'll
up
do
right now.
is you will show up, and so this is Shabazz's YouTube channel. And
Yep.
then the VMware based one, it will show up on YouTube. I believe they broadcast via YouTube and Facebook. I have not yet figured out exactly where the Facebook pieces are. So I know the YouTube shows up here. And so I'm live in 4 days. I'll be showcasing some high level demos with Azure VMware Solution, like how to deploy it, how to integrate it with different Azure services. So if you have time next week, it'll be 12:10 Central. So it's 1:10 by Pierre. And if you can't catch it live, it will be available on demand in short order. I think it takes them like maybe a half a day or a day to get it up into their queue of all their videos. And then from there, I'm doing a cloud lunch and learn next Wednesday. And I think Hugo has been playing point on that front, Hugo and Lisa Clark. So they're the ones that reached out to me.
Okay.
And it will be at 12 o'clock next Wednesday. So I'm not sure all of the right ways to grab the URLs to showcase, but I know that a lot of folks have been watching the Cloud Lunch and Learns. So, and if you're, Lisa, if you're watching, or Hugo, if you're watching, or even Dwayne Natwick knows too, they could possibly even add a comment. And I'm not sure exactly where everything gets broadcast. I just know that I'm going to be joining them next Wednesday to go through some of that.
Well, Shannon, you're gonna. I didn't see those before I posted the blog article on IT.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
So I will edit the blog post and I'll put these URLs in. So if you're interested in any of these events, aka.ms/AZUpdate, and you'll get all of the information as soon as I can put it up there.
Nice. Well, thank you. I forget that we do the blog posts as well for some of these shows. So I was just thinking about that. I was looking at my calendar late yesterday and I'm like, oh gosh, I forgot about these. So, so apologies for getting them in the OneNote a little late.
Oh, no worries at all. And to conclude our show this week, we have our normal Learn Module of the Week. And for that, we picked this week in honor of your illustrious presence, the Run VMware Workloads on Azure VMware Solution, because you wrote it.
I did. I wrote it in conjunction with Pumala. So there are 3 different modules in here. The first one introduces the service. The second module showcases everything you need to know about deployment. And then the third module is how to build out and migrate workloads from on-premises. So it'll take you through the solution. It's not like a lot of other Learn modules where you get a sandbox, but you get the sort of guided tutorial of how to set it up. So if you've got an environment and you are able to get Azure VMware Solutions showing up in your world, you could walk through this and get familiarity with how this gets deployed inside of a subscription.
That is wonderful. Actually, I have to admit that I have never really been a VMware person. But I did put this one in my to-do list because I'm interested in learning a bit more about it.
Yeah, VMware's I think how a lot of us sort of cut our proverbial teeth, right? HyperV, when HyperV was around back in the 2008 era, it didn't share resources the same way that VMware did, and so a lot of customers started with VMware and never really evolved towards HyperV. I feel like Hyper-V eventually got to where it was very much so like for like, but at that point, customers were so into the world of VMware that it was hard to kind of pull them out into the Hyper-V realm. So you're not alone by any stretch of the definition. There's so many people who spent more time in the Microsoft stack.
Yep. So, all right. So we are at the end. It's been 30 minutes already, Shannon.
It blew by.
It did. So if people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
So I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle shows up at the bottom of my little video, and then LinkedIn. LinkedIn's another spot to grab me as well. Those are the two areas that I tend to communicate very, very regularly with folks in the community, folks that are interested in trying to make sense of Azure. And, Azure VMware Solutions has been something I've been focused on, but I also know a lot about Azure in general, because prior to this role, I was an architect helping big enterprises embrace the cloud. So either LinkedIn or Twitter.
Okay, perfect. And I have been and always shall be at Wired Canuck. And both of us are also active on our Discord server. So if you want to start a conversation, come and see us there.
Yeah, that's true.
And with that being said, thank you so much for spending the morning with us.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
It's great. I always have a great time talking with you. You're funny. And with all of you out there, stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Bye, everyone.